So recently I shot a wedding where the light was harsh and also dark at the same time. I don't know if you've ever shot in those conditions before or dealt with those conditions, but it can be one of the most challenging things ever. So light can be your friend or it can be your enemy. And how you use it to your advantage or how you shield it to your advantage is always the key. So I'll admit I'm still learning how to use light to my advantage. There's a few things that I've learned over the shoots that I've had in harsh lighting and dark lighting. Whatever it might be for you, hopefully I can share a little insight from the things that I've learned during my shoots. Now, I've talked lighting on this channel before, and I understand that probably for the majority of those who follow my channel, this is a bit of a snore fest. I apologize, it's just things that I geek out on. But I want to share with you at least a few tips that you can use practically for your shoots, no matter what the conditions, lighting conditions are. The frustrating thing is we want to control light as much as possible. But if you are a run and gun shooter or, especially a wedding videographer or a photographer, it is really, really challenging to control the light as you would like. The venues are different. You can't necessarily always control where the ceremony is going to be if it's an outdoor wedding. And oftentimes it's in the afternoon, the heat of the day, the sun is at its highest peak. It's just creating these crazy, crazy harsh shadows. And no matter where you are, it just doesn't look the way that you would like it to look. So what do you do? So my first tip is this: shoot from the shadow side, meaning if you have harsh lighting, shoot for the shadow side of the face or the subject or whatever it is that you're capturing, and guard yourself from the harsh lighting. You can't always do this, but as much as possible, you're going to add some depth and some character to your shot rather than blowing things out and not having any details. You just kind of want to avoid that as best as possible. The second important part is know what you're going to expose for. Meaning, do you want that silhouette shot without very much detail on the subjects? Or are you going to blow out all of the highlights in order to capture the details of your subject? This is something that I had to continually make a decision on based on the shot that I was getting. And most of the time I sacrificed the highlights in order to capture the subject because that was the most important part. Yes, where they were was important, and sometimes I did expose for that. But as a videographer, you need to make that choice, especially with the lighting being so polarizing. Golden hour, you can kind of get away with it a little more. And exposing for the highlights and the subject, it gives that real moody look, and that's great. But when you're shooting midday and shooting right into the sun, you have to make that choice. And in the context of weddings, typically you want to capture the subject because they want to see themselves, not the background, unless you're at an amazing venue. Now, if you're shooting something for a client and you have the ability to take your time and control the lighting accordingly, then all of that doesn't really matter. This is more so for the run and gun. How do you on the fly quickly navigate using light to the best of your advantage? So my next tip in using light to your advantage, especially in a run and gun situation, is this: know your camera. Know your settings inside and out. Know how to adjust quickly your ISO. Know how to change your ND filter if need be. And make sure that you're always watching your exposure levels, that you're getting the most accurate shot that you can get. This is something I've had to learn the hard way. I set up for an amazing shot and all of a sudden I realize, oh no, it's too dark or it's too bright. And if you have to, in that moment, figure out, okay, what do I change? Where are my buttons? Do I want to change my f-stop? Am I changing my shutter speed? What is it that I'm doing? You have to know how you want to handle those situations. How do you quickly navigate going from a super bright situation to super dark? What setting are you going to change quickly? Now, Peter McKinnon and others are creating these amazing ND filters that just snap on, so you can pop those on and off super quickly. That hasn't been the case though. The one that I have on here takes a while. You got to screw it on. I can't easily just take an ND filter off and put it on. It takes me a little bit of time. For me, what I do, my go-to is ISO. I shoot on Sony cameras, so I have the a7S III and the FX3, which both have the dual ISO. So I can go from 640 all the way up to 12,800. So basically what that means is I can get my ISO super low to shoot, in really bright situations, along with my ND that gets me pretty far. And then I can also, if I'm in a dark place, I can bump it all the way to 12,800, and that gives me a new baseline to shoot in real low light situations. Even with my ND filter on, it gives me a lot of flexibility, so I will pop back and forth between those base ISOs regularly, and then use my ND filter to make sure that I'm exposed correctly. So ultimately, you need to know your camera and your camera settings, because light can change at a moment's notice. For instance, this wedding that I was just shooting, there were clouds, and so the sun would go behind a cloud and it'd get super dark, and then it would come out and get super bright, and it would go dark and bright and dark and bright. And sometimes you just have to set it in the middle and you just deal with both ends of that. But the sun would come out, it would kind of blow them out. So I had to keep adjusting back and forth. And it was really helpful to know how I was going to manage that. A lot of it was with my ND filter. So I could just twist this, and that usually got me pretty close. Sometimes, it got super dark though, and it wasn't enough, and I had to bump my ISO up. Again, knowing your camera, knowing your settings, that way you can use the light to your advantage and manipulate it the way that you want it to look. And the last thing is, use the lighting that you have to your advantage. Be creative with it. Don't be afraid of it. I think a lot of times we see harsh lighting, or we all want the golden hour, and there's a time and place, and I would highly recommend you use that kind of lighting. But there can be some amazing shots that you can grab when you think creatively with the light that you have. For instance, think about different angles. Think about how the shadows actually work across your subject's face, or are there little things that pop because the sun's brightness is reflecting off of the water, or popping through the mountains at some weird angle. And I know that if we think a little more creatively, take our time, and see what is really beautiful about the lighting that we have, we can make amazing shots. So that's my encouragement. If you are a photographer, videographer, or just someone who enjoys being in the outdoors, there's always options. There's always ways that you can use something that seems negative to actually be a positive. I just wanted to share those things with you because I was a little frustrated at first that the lighting wasn't what I envisioned for this shoot or this wedding, and yet halfway through I was kind of excited about some of the shots I was getting, especially with such harsh lighting, and it worked out pretty well, I think. And I hope it does for you as well. So there you go. That's my lighting tips and tricks for this one. And we'll see you in the next one. See you guys.